Hello and welcome to today's ESA Hangout with Rosetta. I'm Daniel Skuka. I'm Senior Editor for Spacecraft Operations here at the European Space Operations Center in Darmstadt, Germany. In today's ESA Hangout, we'll speak with mission experts at ESOC and at ESTEC, ESA's technical center in the Netherlands, and get an update, the latest news on the Rosetta mission at Comet 67P CG, currently something like 425 million kilometers away. We'll also speak with some of the engineers working on the Philae lander, which is an especially critical or timely topic, given that we just saw last week the announcement of the 5 candidate landing sites. We'll also have a little fun, pulling some names out of a hat to award the 10 Lucky Dip winners coming from our Rosetta Are We There Yet photo contest, where we had some absolutely fabulous submissions coming from all over the world, and we were able to pick a couple of top winners just a few days ago. But we've got a few more goodie bags to give away to 10 lucky people, and of course we'll devote at least half, or the second half of our Google Hangout, our ESA Hangout, to answering as many of your questions as we can. I see there are already some coming in. You can post your questions right here in the ESA Hangout in the G+ page. You can also post them in our YouTube channel, where we're concurrently running in a YouTube video. And of course, you can tweet them using the Ask Rosetta hashtag, and we'll pick them up. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. We can't promise to answer all of them, but certainly we'll try and get to them. Don't hesitate to post. I'd like now to welcome our Hangout participants. Here with me at ESOC is Rosetta Flight Director Andrea Accomazzo. Welcome, Andrea.
Thanks, Daniel. Hi.
Okay, good. Thanks for joining us. And at ESTEC, remote is his technical center, as I mentioned, in Holland. We're joined by Mission Manager Fred Jansen. Hello, Fred. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Happy to be here.
Good stuff. We're also joined at ESTEC by Matt Taylor, who is our Rosetta project scientist. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Daniel. Hello, everyone.
Good stuff. We've got a good connection there. We'll also be joined later on with Matt by our senior editor for science, Emily Baldwin. She'll pop in when we do our name pulling. And back here to Germany, in Cologne, we have a couple of special guests from the Philae Lander Control Center, which is actually hosted at the DLR establishment in Cologne. Joining us today are Barbara Cozzoni, a Philae operations engineer, and Valentina Lomach, who is a member of the Philae operations team. We're really pleased to have both of you joining us today. Welcome, Barbara and Valentina.
Hello, everybody.
Good. We seem to have a good connection.
Thank you.
By the way, both Barbara and Valentina are logging in from a video conference room actually located at the European Astronaut Center. That's why you see a big European Space Agency graphic behind their heads. A big ISS graphic. Just ignore that one. I'd like to start by asking all of our participants to do a quick 1-minute self-introduction, and I'll start with Fred Jansen over in ESTEC. Fred.
Yes, well, I'm the mission manager of Rosetta, which basically means that I'm supposed to be in control of everything. The supposed to is an important element. I try to make sure that all parties involved in Rosetta interface with each other in the right way, and that everything runs smoothly. So my job basically is enabling that other people can do their job.
Great, thank you, Fred. I'll jump right over now to Matt Taylor, also at ESTEC.
Hi there. Well, I'm the project scientist. I work very closely with Fred. My principal job is to interface between ESA and the scientific community. So it's my job to make sure that the science that we want to do with the mission is done to the best of our ability. So I have to interface with Fred and Andrea, probably too much, but that's basically it. I try and impress on them the importance of the science that the mission is there to do.
Good stuff, thank you. And I'll ask Andrea right here in ESOC with me to do a quick self-intro.
I'm Andrea Accomazzo. I'm the flight director for Rosetta. I've worked the last 18 years of my life on this project, and I'm leading now the so-called mission control team here at ESOC, so in the control center to coordinate all activities linked to the planning and the conduct of the operations for the mission.
Thank you. Jumping over to Cologne, and Barbara, if you could go first.
Yes, I'm Barbara, and Valentina is with me here in Cologne. We are lander operational engineer. What we do every day, we basically collect the science requests from the scientist who wants to work with the lander. We test, and we try to have all the requirements in place. We try to have the lander working, and we test, and then we upload all the commands, and we execute the request from the scientist on the lander. We check after that all the activity have been performed correctly, and we provide the data, the scientist data, to the scientist. Exactly.
Great. And do you want to add anything, Valentina?
Our specific expertise lies for me in the solar array power predictions, and for Barbara in the thermal environment of Philae.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions coming for both of you. There's a lot of interest in Philae these days. Right. What I'd like to do now is ask each of our participants to give our audience, our web audience, a brief update. Take 4 or 5 minutes and let us know what's happening with your particular area of the mission. And we could start off with here to my left, Andrea. What's happening with Rosetta operations?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. So Rosetta, well, first thing to say is we are at the comet. I think everybody more or less knows we came to the comet early August as planned after 10 years of interplanetary flight through the solar system. We had to conduct the whole approach phase towards this object, and slowly we also discovered the odd shape of this object, or at least unexpected shape of this object. What we have done in the last weeks, now in August, was to characterize the comet down to a level that allows us to go further into the mission, fly around the comet. We've completed a first characterization phase at a distance from the comet of, roughly speaking, 100 kilometers. This is what we call pyramid orbit. It's a very peculiar trajectory we had designed in order to characterize the comet. When we came to the comet, we had an estimation of some parameters of the comet which are fundamental for us to conduct the remaining part of the flight. But this was just an estimation, nothing more than that. We had to do much more than that. We had to characterize in depth the comet. Fundamentally, is the gravity field of the comet, but not only the shape, the attitude, the spin axis. All this was done in a matter of a couple of weeks following the orbit insertion on the 6th of August, or what we call orbit insertion on the 6th of August. And this has worked out very, very well. The system here has worked properly. The comet didn't have any surprise for us, so our system recognized the shape. We reconstructed engineering models for all parts of the comet, or features of the comet that are interesting and relevant for us. There's only one feature for which we are still a bit fighting, if you want, to determine, is the exact position of the center of mass of the comet. For the time being, is not causing us any real issue. We can proceed with the mission, but it's something that is causing us some headaches behind the scenes. But we will resolve it in due time for when we need it more precisely. After this first pyramid at 100 kilometers, we flew down a bit closer to the comet. We have been flying arcs spanning between 70 and 50 kilometers in the past 10 days from the comet. And actually tomorrow morning we start going further down. We have now all the parameters we need. We had the parameters we needed to design the trajectory path of the space as from tomorrow onwards. We collected them, so we have designed yesterday the maneuver for tomorrow morning to go further down. Wednesday next week, so in a week from now, we will be down at 29 kilometers. So we will really perform an orbit insertion around the comet. At that stage, the spacecraft will be on a bound, closed orbit around the comet. The first orbit will be, we will actually fly only half of it for 7 days. Then we change the orbital plane. We fly another similar orbit coming after for another 7 days. And then if the comet environment allows us, if we find out that the conditions are okay to continue, then we go farther down, first to 19 and then 10 kilometers from the surface, from the center of the comet, actually. As I said, operations are going very, very smoothly here. All technical details are working very well together. The full chain for planning, commanding, and controlling the spacecraft is working smoothly. Also, we are in full swing with instrument operations. Maybe Matt will say a couple of words later on about the specific subject. And we have collected all the information we need to proceed also in the landing site selection process. You might have seen all over the place that we have sort of pre-selected, the lander team has pre-selected 5 candidate landing sites. We are analyzing them in depth right now, and later in the coming weeks we will narrow down our choice, our selection for the one we want to go. So the team is fully on the ball, I would say. We are preparing details for the upcoming mission phases. There are 2 big question marks in front of us, is what we will find now at the comet once we go farther down. The comet is relatively quiet, I would say, from an activity point of view. We can fly the spacecraft relatively well compared to our prediction, so it's extremely positive news. But we have to be ready in the coming weeks to face an unexpected activation of the comet. So we have to be ready to switch to our backup plans. We actually have prepared 3 different plans, orbital plans for the coming weeks, called ABC. The first one goes from 29, then 19, and then 10 kilometers. If we cannot go to 10, we stop at 19. If we not even go to 19 kilometers, we would stop at 29 kilometers. So we have to be very careful and ready to interrupt these activities. And as I said, the next one is the preparation for the landing. We are finalizing the selection of the landing site. In parallel, we are preparing and finalizing the test with the colleagues from the Lander Control Center, all the procedures to go through in the last hours before separation, the timelines, which we will finalize only the moment we have selected the landing site, and we have an orbital strategy for this. So this is where we are right now, fully busy but full of enthusiasm and ready to go.
Great, Andrea, thank you very much. That was a good wrap-up. I'd like to switch along now to Fred Jansen in ESTEC, our Rosetta mission manager. Fred?
Well, basically, Andrea said it all, so there is very little left, one would think. Behind the scenes is more where my concern is at the moment, that all the activities that Andrea mentioned are going on at the moment, but literally there are hundreds of people doing the work behind the scenes at the moment. And this is all focused on doing exactly what Andrea described, all these products that we need for landing site selection, planning the parallel planning for the case of 29 and 10, or etc. So all of these ABC cases need to be planned, and there is an immense amount of work going on at the moment. That also creates a lot of tension, a lot of misunderstandings, too many emails flowing around, and to keep this under control is quite hectic. And then in parallel, we are making a heroic attempt to do something on outreach and PR on the blog, etc., which also need to be fed with material. And I have to say, I have a lot of sympathy for the people who provide the material there, because it's an immense amount of work that particularly the instrument teams are doing in preparing all the products. So, and of course there are the daily things we have to deal with. Availability of ground stations in the near future, that we get enough data on the ground, etc., which requires international coordination and internal intense coordination. So all of that, following these processes and pulling the right strings, is what I do.
Great, Fred, thank you very much. I'd like to switch over now to Matt Taylor, our project scientist at ESTEC, and Matt, if you could give us an update, and I wonder even if you could mention anything about some of the science data we've already seen coming in.
Well, that's probably the first point I wanted to make. We've heard a lot about the operational aspects of what we're doing, but we went here to do science, and that was begun already in May. So we started science operations then. This was, twofold. There was a lot of operational support in terms of instrument observations, as Andrea has laid out, but we've been doing science as well, and we're just on the cusp of seeing some of those first results. So that's something that will come within the next couple of weeks. There is an EPSC meeting where the scientists from the missions, this is in Portugal, will be talking about their first results, their first inklings of what they feel about the comet. and its environment. So that's just happening now. We're just getting to that stage where we're able to say something about the comet. And this is driven mainly by distance from the comet. So we saw this that from May period, we were only really getting observations or data from OSIRIS, the camera. And as you got closer and closer, you brought all of the other instruments into range. And that's what we're still seeing. We're still just on the edge of some of the instrument capabilities in terms of where they think they'll get something. But we've basically ticked the box with most of the instruments now in terms of having detected something and having something to say. As has been alluded to, it's an incredibly busy period. So the instrument teams, as well as the operation teams, are working both operationally and scientifically. So they're trying to do all of this at the same time. Fred may correct me, but I believe it's true to say that this is probably the most operationally intense mission that ESA has ever flown, has ever attempted. So everything is going on, and Fred alluded to the stress levels of everyone, the amount of effort that everyone is making here from the agency perspective, so guys at ESAC and ESOP, but also the instrument teams themselves. So they're trying to do all of this and provide data to their teams to start the science, to activate the science, as well as supporting the outreach activity as well. So it's all going on. I'd like to also add, one of the things that I've personally been involved in has been to do with the long-term planning. So we've heard about some of the plans that are ongoing now, but we also have to set the rails in a certain way for the future. So we're actually looking already at what's going to happen after the landing in terms of the orbiter science and how we do that. There's lander science there as well, but we have to set the rails pretty early to allow this stuff to happen. So we've been making predictions based on the observations that we've seen thus far to enable us to constrain how we do the science operations in the future. So that's been a big activity most recently.
Great, Matt, thank you. Actually, one initial question for you. I'm wondering, what have you personally seen so far that has really surprised you about this comet? What has really made you sort of go, oh my goodness, I didn't expect that?
To be honest with you, I was expecting the unexpected, to coin a phrase, but of course I think everyone has to say the shape. That's something that we weren't thinking about. If I just zip backwards quickly, this is a 3D model of what we had from Hubble. So this is basically what we thought the thing was going to be. We thought it was a great potato, and so certainly operationally that's been an impact, as you heard from Andrea. But scientifically, that's something that's incredibly interesting for us to ponder. As I say, we're on the cusp of starting to hack into basically, what is it about this comet that has made it that shape? So that's just happening now.
Great, thank you very much. We'll come back to you later. There are already quite a few questions I see coming up which relate to science. We could move over now to our DLR colleagues, to Barbara and Valentina, and I wonder if you could give us a quick 5-minute overview on what's happening now with your team, with the lander. For example, are you already seeing telemetry coming from the lander? Are you already checking things out on board? What's happening with the lander, and what's happening with your team?
Okay, I can start. Personally, I'm more involved at the moment in the preparation of the activity for September or October for the lander. So let's say what is going on before the landing itself. Valentina is more involved of what will be after. During and after the landing. So already in 2 days we switch on the lander again. There will be the last test of our subsystem. We will discharge and charge our batteries to check if they are still working and to monitor the performance. And we will test also our communication system between the lander and the orbiter in a configuration that is more optimized for the comet, let's say. And then what we start to do end of the week, we continue to do end of the week, it's some science. So we switch on again on Sunday afternoon. We will take our first picture with our cameras. So obviously we will not have a nice and high resolution picture as from Osiris or from the NavCam, but it will be interesting for us to have such a picture. We also switch on another instrument, ROMAP, which will start to give us some first data regarding the magnetic field of the comet. We do our other science in October, and the end of October there will be the final correcting the line, and then we start the on-comet phase.
Currently, we have finished testing the first science sequence, which will be the first set of science that we do as soon as we land on the comet. With it's about 60 hours worth of science. Hopefully, we'll be able to fit it all in. But we are also currently working on the separation, descent, and landing phase. That one will go into test soon, as soon as possible. And the first science sequence, we are preparing to do a back-to-back test where we'll test the entire sequence as a whole also very soon.
Great, thank you very much. Actually, at that point, Andrea, I just wonder if you could say a couple of words about the cooperation between the Orbiter Control Center here at ESAC and the Lander Control Center at DLR. How is that actually functioning?
Well, we have two channels of coordination with the lander in general. The first one is happening if you want, in the background, and is very tightly linked to the landing site selection process itself. We have links not only to the Lander Control Center, but more in general to the lander ground segment, and also with the colleagues in CNES in Toulouse, where they do the flight dynamics part of the lander. So this is one thread we have. And then with Valentina and Barbara and their colleagues as well in the lander-specific control center, then we have very tight relationship and contacts to define the final procedures we'll have for the landing itself. We have to go through the activation of the lander in the last days. We have to organize the preparation of the lander just before the separation. The go-no-goes, we will have interaction in real time when monitoring whether the lander and the orbiter are ready to go for a separation. So we have to have very tight coordination on these procedures. We are also preparing how we will interact after the lander is separated from the orbiter, as is on the surface. The colleagues from the Lander Control Center, of course, have the need to communicate rapidly with the lander to see what the status of the lander is, and possibly react in case of anomalies, or even also in nominal cases, they might have the need to interact, not real time, but pseudo real time with the lander. So we are organizing all this behind the scene, and we are writing the procedures and agreeing on how to exchange data in that critical time frame.
Great, thank you very much. And actually, I wonder if we could hop over to Fred at STEC. And Fred, I just wonder, we heard a few comments just in our roundtable about upcoming activities, upcoming events, and of course, do you want to say a few words about the sequence of events that you see coming up with the mission in the next few weeks?
Yeah, well, landing site selection is the big thing going on at the moment. A week ago, we announced the 5 landing sites. They are being analyzed by ESOC, the first 2 on that list, in very great detail for their reachability, and already that has given us some surprises, and we've had to reshuffle some priorities there to be able to make sure that we analyze landing sites which we can reach in the optimum way, and optimum is a bit of a difficult issue here. So that is ongoing, and then in a week and a half we'll have the final meeting over the weekend in Saturday, Sunday in Toulouse, where everybody will sit around the table and discuss how to get from the 5 to the final 2. And once we have the final 2, there is a press conference on the 15th announcing the landing site, because we will have selected the prime. That then goes into much further detailed analysis by ESOC, of course, using the fact that we're getting to be very close to the comet soon, and all the more closer all the time. They will look at this, and so will the OSIRIS camera, for example, make boulder maps of all of the selected landing site, etc. So we're going in ever-increasing detail, and then somewhere mid-October we have a formal ESA confirmation together with the Lander Consortium of the final landing site, and basically that is from a management perspective the go, no go. Then we go forward, and then shortly before the actual landing there is a real, as you know it from movies, go, no go type of meeting where we decide, yes, we're going to uplink the commands or not. So this is roughly the timeline. In parallel, of course, there is, as Matt alluded to, a lot of science going on. There is a science working team meeting in 2.5 weeks' time, where I'm sure there will be many, many early indications on the table. There is a conference coming up where I'm sure, again, the same thing will happen. So everything is bubbling. PR-wise, it's very busy and difficult at times. So it's there is a, how do you say this? There is something in the air which makes you say this is worthwhile.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, Fred. Right, I wonder if we could take a little pause on our main program today. And Matt, I'm hoping that our colleague Emily is somewhere nearby in your office.
There you go.
Hi, Daniel. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Emily. I'd like to introduce our senior science editor, Emily Baldwin, who is joining us for a brief period here to actually pick, I think it is 10 names out of a hat. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. So for those of us who've, who've been following the social media activities and our online efforts, will be familiar with the Rosetta Are We There Yet photo contest, where we asked you to capture feelings of journeys and arriving at a destination after a long journey to support Rosetta in the last leg to the comet last month. So we announced our 2 main winners and runners-up already last week, and we're looking forward to having our main winners at ESOP with us for the landing event. And today, with the help of my assistant here, we're going to pull 10 runners-up out of the hat, or rather the ESO plastic bag.
And Emily, before you start, I just want to confirm this is a European Space Agency first, the first time we've ever done this live in a Google Hangout.
Excellent. Okay, so
I shall try my best now. The pressure is on. Yeah.
What we've done is we've cut them up, cut up all the pictures, and we'll post them online afterwards. So the first one out of the hat is from Twitter at Lego Space Geek, wins an Easter goodie bag. Number 2. Another Twitter one at Leo Cabal. Well done. Have a rummage. Yep, this one is from David Pinello Martinez. Karen Cahoot, I think. This one is from Ruthie147. Linda Treadwell. Oh yeah, 8. Chris Sagelsi. Number 8 is Jan Jones. Gert Muller. And last but not least is from Twitter, username at Nympha23. So congratulations to all of those, and we will contact you for your mailing address and send you some nice things. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Emily. That was great. Thank you, Matt. You did an excellent job. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you both.
Put it on my CV now.
See you later.
Good. What we can do now is actually switch into the second half of our Hangout, and I think we can start addressing some of the questions coming in. And just let you know, I'm watching in semi-real time here via a feed where I'm seeing some of the questions being picked up, or indeed many of the questions. So I'll pass them over and throw them out to whoever might be best to answer. And the first one is probably for Andrea Accomazzo, and it's coming in from Khalid Saeed. I'm not pronouncing that very well. And he is saying, how far does the spacecraft fly by the comet? And I'm thinking he's trying to get at what are some of the distances, and certainly some of the distances for deploying the lander.
Okay, so what we have been doing in the last 10 days, so to say, is the second pyramid orbit, the one we used to call 50 kilometers. In reality, we are doing some segments flying in front of the comet, and the distance was ranging between 72 and 52 kilometers, to be precise. What we will start tomorrow morning, we will start an approach phase which will lead us to be at 29 kilometers from the center of the comet Wednesday next week. At that stage, we will be at 29 kilometers. For the lander delivery, we are still analyzing it. We had past ideas of going very close to the comet to deliver the lander, but most recent analysis, more detailed analysis, and the shape of the comet are playing a role in what we will have to do in November. So the exact separation, the distance at which the spacecraft will be when the lander separates, I cannot say it because we don't know it yet. It depends also on the landing site we will select and the strategy we'll adopt. But for sure, we'll be in the range, I would say, 10 to maybe 25 kilometers or something like this. We are talking about something like this. It depends, I repeat, strongly on the strategy. Whereas in the past, we thought we would be a bit closer to the comet.
Okay, good stuff. The second question is coming in from Don Merritt, also for Andrea, and he's asking, when comet activity forces Rosetta further away from 67P, what is the maximum distance between Rosetta and Philae at which communications can be maintained? And is outgassing from the comet expected to interfere with communications?
Okay, on this last part, I don't know. I'm not an expert of the RF system of Philae, but the distance we are trying to keep the spacecraft within a distance of 60 kilometers. We can communicate with the lander also from farther distances, but the communication link becomes a bit marginal. So we try to fly as close as possible to the comet. There is an interest for the lander as well for us to stay as close as possible to the comet, not only from the lander. And regards, Don. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, Don Merritt, yeah. And actually, Barbara, I wonder if you also want to mention from your point of view, how far would you like to keep Rosetta once you're actually getting down to the surface?
Okay, obviously we would like to have Rosetta not too far, but the distance is not the only criteria for us. For us, it's also important the frequency. I mean, Rosetta can have its own trajectory. Of course, he has to fly far and close to the comet according to other constraints due to the trajectory, the field, and so on, the comet itself. But for our point of view, it's very important to have the communication with Rosetta quite frequently. We don't, for us, it's a problem to have a big gap in one communication and the next one, because we do not communicate directly with Earth. We communicate through Rosetta. So at a certain point, when we operate, we collect data, we will have our mass memory full. And obviously, at that point, we do need to dump our data through the orbiter, through Rosetta. Otherwise, we will lost what we are collecting. Also, the link are very important to upload the new commanding. For the moment the lander will land, it will have on board, let's say, more or less the whole first time sequence. So what he will do during the first days. But we plan, and we hope to do more in the following days. But we have to upload these commands. So we have to tell the lander what to do after. And for that, again, we need the link with the Rosetta. Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, thank you very much. The next question is directed at our project scientist, Matt Taylor, and it's coming in from Fotios Tsasagas, I'm not pronouncing that very well, who is joining us from Greece. And he says, how long is it estimated for Philae to stay with the comet? Will it still be there in August 2015 when the comet makes its closest approach to the sun? And is there a possibility for the comet to break in two pieces later on? He also mentions in August. Matt.
Okay, our lander colleagues can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, and also as was alluded to earlier on, there's a short period of science that we aim for with the lander, and then there's a long period. Ultimately, my understanding of the lifetime of the lander is driven by the temperature constraints on the comet, and ultimately I think it's around about the end of March is when we think we may be at the extremes of what is capable in terms of the lander. Of course, this is given the best scenario. There are also other issues that the environment itself of the comet, the fact that it's a very dusty and gassy environment, and as we've seen or heard, the lander has solar panels that needs the sun, or to be able to see the sun, to generate electricity and power the lander. So if they're covered with dust, that's going to limit the lifetime of the lander. But my understanding is that around about March next year is the limit of how long the lander will survive. And in terms of the comet splitting up, I hope it doesn't, because that will significantly complicate our job. It will make it even more interesting, of course. But who knows? That's why we go and check out comets and investigate them, because they are unpredictable beasts. Let's see what happens. Stay tuned, everyone.
Thank you, Matt. And actually, the next question coming in from E. Farage via Twitter segues nicely into your final comment there. Are the results from Philae helping us to understand life's history on Earth, or the history of our solar system in some degree?
Well, at a high level, you can look at Rosetta as a mission in its entirety, as that's what it's addressing. It's addressing our origins, the origins of the solar system. Comets are interesting because they're looked at as these deep frozen relics from the beginning of the solar system. So by journeying and studying these bodies, we get a window into the past. It's like a time capsule. We see the conditions that existed at that time period. Rosetta will provide us with the best characterization of a comet that's ever been made before. And by Rosetta, I mean both Philae and the Rosetta orbiter. So the mission will give us the best information to address those questions.
Thank you. I'd like to pass on a question now I see coming in from Jonathan Amos, and this is for Fred Jansen, our mission manager. And Jonathan is asking, can you explain the naming scheme that's been chosen for the features on the comet's surface? Where did you pull the list of names from? And can you give us some examples of some of the names you've used so far?
Well, we were a bit late actually with this, because there are plenty of features we can see and resolve, and we do not have a fully agreed naming scheme yet. Matt is enthusiastically working with the science team to come to a solution there. I think we will probably go in the direction which will not surprise anybody, given Rosetta and Philae as names, into some kind of Egyptian theme for naming the different sites. The name of the landing site itself is a different kettle of fish. This is a more complicated and has to be coordinated with the Lander consortium. But the features on the comet, we will probably pick a theme like that. And of course, we also have to look at international standards for, you can't just start naming things anything you want. There has to be some kind of coordination, etc. And I'm very happy to say that Matt is taking care of all this.
Thank you, Fred. Good stuff. The next question is for our DLR colleagues. Barbara and Valentina is coming in from Rajendra Dev. And he's asking, I believe that the gravitation force of the comet is very small. In light of this, how will Philae actually land on the comet?
We have 2 anchors, as well as hooks within the feet, and a system to push us onto the comet once we land. So basically, our landing sequence is, we have a model that we can use and show. Basically, our landing sequence is as soon as we get closer to the surface, the ADS is what it is called, will push us down onto the surface. There are small hooks here in the feet that you can kind of see, which should be hopefully pushed into the surface. And we have 2 anchors, which I don't think are on this model, which will also be shot to pull us onto the surface. So that is our landing sequence then. Hopefully it will work. It depends on what the comet surface is made of. If it's a very rocky surface, obviously the anchors probably won't be so useful, and neither will the feet. And if it's a very dusty surface, we could get pushed into the comet, which would also be not so optimal, especially for our solar array. But that is the theory behind our landing sequence.
Good stuff.
I've completely lost audio.
Oh, okay. Nope. Yeah, we were on mute. Sorry, my fault. No, we're still on. Back to the question, which was asking about the selection criteria for the 5 landing sites, and was it a balance between the expected scientific results, between the technical constraints of the lander, or something special or interesting about the landing sites themselves? And I wonder if we could pass that over to Barbara to begin with, and then Matt, I'd certainly like to get your take on that as well.
Sorry, we didn't catch the question. You were muted and the connection was bad for a while. Can you repeat?
Yep, the question is asking what are the criterion for the selection of the landing sites, and what are some of the factors you have to balance in order to come up with the 5 candidate sites?
Okay, I heard only half of the question, but okay, the 5 candidate sites. Okay, from our point of view, obviously we were hoping in a very nice landing sites, flat, no boulder, well illuminated, not too much illuminated because we might have problem with overheating, and yeah, but the reality is quite different. So what are we doing at the moment, especially Valentina and I? We are working, and we are working a lot, try to understand how we can have the maximum science return with the lander in the condition we will face on these 5 landing sites. So we know the illumination of these sites, we know how much energy we will get from the solar array, which is indeed the special task from Valentina. I personally do simulation to know the thermal behavior of the lander, because unfortunately we cannot warming up and we cannot cooling down the lander actively. So we don't have a system when the lander is too warm to cool down the temperature, and on the other way, when the temperature is too low, we don't have an active system to warm up. So we really need a good place where the temperature are inside the range we need for the operation, where the energy from the solar array is high enough to have the lander operating, because we cannot rely only on the battery. Our primary battery will be depleted after this first science sequence, so after the science we will do during the first days, and the secondary battery probably will also be used to perform such operation. So we need energy from the solar array. That's why the landing site has to have a good topography to have a safe landing, but also a good place in terms of illumination in order to recharge our battery and perform our operation later on.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'd like to pass that question to Matt as well. What are some of the science trade-offs or balances you're trying to make in site selection?
I think I'd have to go generally again here. This is the whole point of why Rosetta is so sexy. It's because we've never done this before, and we have to do these trades continually. Which you know, Andrea and his team are constantly battling with the comet to get us as close as possible, whilst my team and the science teams are trying to push us as far as possible to get where we need to go to do the science. So that's the overall. That's going to be there for the whole mission. It's always there because we're breaking new ground here. We're doing something that's unique. So we're constantly trying to trade and feel our way forward in terms of technical challenges to enable us to do the science. For the landing site selection, it was one of the number of criteria that we used to do the down selection, to look at really what we want to optimize the science that we can do. But you know, as you can see from the spread of the landing sites, there are different spots that may provide us with different science, but you have this concentrate with respect to maximizing science with a possible minimal chance of doing or getting the lander down to a maximum chance of getting the lander down, and maybe you minimizing your science. So all of this has to be considered.
Good stuff. Andrea, do you want to say anything about any of the constraints coming from the orbiter in terms of landing site selection? Are there some orbits that Rosetta couldn't get into, or are there some limitations?
Well, definitely the lander itself has some constraint at touchdown. So apart from what has already been mentioned by Barbara and Valentina, the lander has some technical constraint when it touches down. So this implies that some landing site or some areas on the comet are not accessible at all from pure the landing when to touchdown. The orbiter has some constraints. There are some limitations in the systems we have on board the orbiter to separate the lander. We have limitation on how we can fly the orbiter around the comet. So all these constraints, these features, play an active role in the landing site selection process and in the feasibility of each landing site, in the design of the strategy. And this is what we are exactly doing now. For each candidate landing site, we are proving or checking whether we can actually reach it with an operational orbit. And then we do also an error analysis, what it would mean in case, or simulating the uncertainties we have in the whole process. So this is what we are doing exactly now. And all this plays definitely a role in the whole process. Scientific arguments, or as mentioned by Matt, what Barbara was mentioning as well, but definitely also in the end we have to reach a safe place, and we have to reach it safely. So it's the only way we have to do it.
Right, thank you. There's another question coming from Matt, and it's coming in from Sylvain Schwebke, who asks, what methods do you have to check surface properties prior to the landing? Are they optical or otherwise?
Well, we have a number of wavelengths that help us probe the surface. So we've already seen results that have come from Vertis that give us, so this is the infrared spectrometer that gives us an idea of what the surface is like, its temperature, etc. We also have the Miro instrument, which can kind of probe just below the surface and look at the temperature profile there. So we can actually get an idea of that profile of the surface, and that gives us indications based on simulations in our previous experience with comets as to what the makeup of that surface is. So that's something that went into this landing site selection. So we had that information with us to kind of look at different spots and where the best spot would be in terms of for science and also operationally.
Great, and actually there's a quick one coming in from Leo Vuk, who says, to Matt Taylor, has the comet got a magnetic field?
Well, this is something, well, we've heard that there'll be some magnetic measurements being made by the lander. We also have magnetic field measurements made by the orbiter as well. It's possibly unlikely that it's got an intrinsic magnetic field. It's more likely that something would have been induced by its interaction with the solar wind. This is something that I'm personally very interested in from my heritage in plasma physics. But one of the goals of the Rosetta mission is to investigate how the outer atmosphere of the sun, the solar wind, interacts with this comet, with this body. You'll get this weird magnetosphere forming around the comet, so that this solar wind will be stopped and pushed around the comet. The magnetic field that's actually locked in the solar wind will interact with the body as well. We may get inducement of magnetic fields. This is all something that we'll be looking at, that fantastic interaction that you get with plasmas that you can't see, but it's great, believe me. But that's something we're doing.
Good stuff. Thank you very much. Question coming in now, which I think maybe would go towards Fred, our mission manager, and the question is, how are the data coming from this mission going to be published, or how are the data being published now?
Well, published here is a very wide topic. If I separate it into two parts, the scientific part is, well, the data are being taken and interpreted, written up as scientific papers, and hopefully published in a reputable journal in a bundle together as a first go. This process is made possible by something which we call proprietary data rights, which is the standard for scientific missions, that the PI teams get a time to actually exploit the data and publish their scientific results, which is their job. And the real justification for that, for example, lies in the fact that at the moment many of the teams are busy for 3 months purely with generating landing products. And so they need a certain period in which they can do their work. And then there is the other part, of course, there is PR, releasing stuff on the web, images, etc. And there we have to follow a policy which allows us to not impinge, or how do you say this, not to invade the scientific proprietary data rights and disallow people to write their scientific publications, while at the same time give the public what it deserves, which is good insight in what this mission is doing.
Great, thank you, Fred. Question now for our DLR colleagues in Cologne, and the question is referring to dust. And what is the likelihood of dust in the landing area, and what are the chances that the dust settles on the solar arrays, and of course affecting the power available to the lander?
Okay, well, we don't have any real good methods to determine whether or not there is dust. There are orbiter instruments who are go in that direction. Also, if we just look at the images that OSIRIS provides us, which is the orbiter camera, if it's a very, very smooth surface, you could say perhaps there might be dust there. But there just isn't a very good way to say whether or not we have dust coverage. And it is very important for the solar array. The simulation tool that we are using to simulate the power that the solar array generates does encompass dust as well. We haven't had to use it yet, but we have data attached to the orbiter in cruise, and our plan currently is to compare that data from the solar array to data once we have landed on the comet's surface to determine whether or not we are being covered by dust. And we have a factor then that we can calculate in to change the solar array output, and basically by trial and error find out about how much dust coverage we might have. And that's basically the best way that we can determine whether or not we're covered by dust. There just isn't a very good way at the moment.
Good, and actually a follow-on question is coming in from Samodelov via Twitter, who is asking, did you actually test the lander and its operations on Earth prior to launch? Were there simulations done? Were there actual physical tests on the lander?
For your launch. Obviously, yes. Before the launch, all the hardware was tested. There were specific tests. I think part of them were performed in Aztec. Part of them were performed at the Max Planck Institute, from where part of the hardware is coming. So yes, we have some reference on-ground tests for sure. But more important for us are the, let's say, the data we collected during these 10 years of cruise, because the lander was switched on several times for when we passed by very close to the Earth, when we passed by close to Mars, when we had flyby to the Lutetia, for example. Yes, exactly. So for us also, these events were very important to characterize the performance of the lander in flight. But obviously, as Valentina mentioned, the comet reality, the comet environment will be different. And we have in place some tools for some prediction, but let's say we will know the real environment only after the landing. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. Again, a follow-on question for the lander, although Matt, you may know this as well. Will the Philae lander sample the cometary surface, the surface dust, or the surface material? If so, what elements or compounds will it be looking for, and will it be looking for isotopic signatures? Okay, am I back on? Yep.
Yes, is the answer. Yeah, we'll be well. The lander will be making those measurements. It will be looking at composition. One of the instruments specifically will be looking at chirality of proteins or organics that we find in the comet, to kind of compare to what we know around the solar system as well. So basically, this will be our in situ. If we look at the Rosetta orbiter as sniffing the comet, the dust and the coma, and the dust of the coma and the gas of the coma, the lander's doing the next thing, or the better thing in a way. It's scratching and sniffing the comet. And that's what it's going to be doing. It's going to be drilling down to about 20 centimeters, I believe, and taking these samples, cooking them in ovens to be able to do spectroscopic analysis to see what this stuff's made of. So yeah, to look for organics. And also, there's a little bit of magnetic field in there as well, of course, and some plasma measurements.
Great, thank you. I'm going to combine several questions here. A number of people have been asking about the true or the actual color of the comet. And I know, Fred, you've been processing some of the NavCam images. A few people are pointing out, well, the images we've seen published on the web and the blog, they tend to be very monochrome, very black and white. What is the true color of the comet? And of course, will we get some color pictures in the future? And particularly, a few people are mentioning about the Philae camera, which of course has already delivered color pictures from previous flybys, what do we expect to see? I wonder who would like to jump on that one.
I'll give it a start. Well, yeah, as you say, we have different cameras. The actual color of the comet is, in general, black. The albedo of comets of this type is roughly between 3 and 4%, which means that they only reflect 3 to 4% of the incoming sunlight, which makes the comet blacker than the darkest T-shirt color you can find in any shop. So you have to bear in mind that, for example, the NavCam images we publish are scaled between black and white, but that is not reality. In reality, this is between extremely black and a bit less extremely black, and that is blown up to the full scale. So NavCam only gives you black and white. OSIRIS has a large number of color filters, and they are and have been mapping the comet in miscellaneous colors. However, as I said before, all these results need processing, and at the moment landing site selection processes have priority. So these are not yet available as a result which we can readily show. And you have to realize that what would come out, like the images we see for Mars, are pseudo colors, because all the color bands that you have are exaggerated from 0 to 100%. So you can get something looking really wild, but in reality, if you were there, you would think, huh? So this is a difficult topic. And of course, indeed, Philae itself has a color camera, and they will undoubtedly make an attempt to catch the comet even before they have landed.
Great, thank you. Barbara, do you want to add anything to that?
Correct. We do have a camera. Actually, we have 5 cameras. One of, I'll show you, one of each side of Philae. Basically, like that, we can take the complete horizon, what Philae is looking at. And as I mentioned, we start this week to use this camera to take our first picture of the comet, but obviously for us it will be very interesting to have the picture on the comet, not of the comet.
Good point.
Right, good point, thank you. I wonder if I could toss one over to Matt now, and this is coming in from Bishak Vupala, and he or she is asking, how will the mission determine whether comets have provided some of the water present in today's oceans?
Well, we have had previous observations of comets. What we measure is a type of flavor of hydrogen related to water. So we look at the deuterium to hydrogen ratio in comets. Now, we've done that spectroscopically. ESA's Herschel mission has looked at this, for instance, and what it found was for a particular class of comets, this ratio of deuterium to hydrogen was similar to that found in Earth's oceans. Previous observations of other comets, so longer period comets, showed that this wasn't the case. So it was kind of indicating that possibly Jupiter-class comets, like Churyumov-Gerasimenko, had a similar ratio to that as found on Earth. That's something we really want to look at with Rosetta, and we should have results on that very, very soon.
Good stuff, thank you. Jonathan Amos has asked a second question, which has been asked by several people. Is there anything about the center of mass that leads you to think that the lobes have different densities? And as a follow-on question, someone else was asking about whether we're going to be able to find out more about the origin. Is it a contact binary? What will we be able to determine about that?
Is that to me again? I'll jump in anyway. As Andrea is pointing out earlier on, this is something that's coming up now, where that centre of mass is, because once we get a good fix on the centre of mass of the comet body itself, it will give us an indication of how heterogeneous the material that makes up the comet is. That will give us a better idea to answer that kind of question, whether it is a contact binary or not. And again, adding in the other observations we're building at the moment to look at the spectroscopic nature of the surface of both of the lobes will give us an indication of that. So that's basically what we're moving towards now. But again, it comes down to the closer we get, the more information we get. So our error bars will go down. And that's what we're looking to do now from the central mass perspective. And I've forgotten what the second part of the question was. I apologise.
Do we think we're going to be able to pin down the origin in the sense that is it a contact binary or not?
Well, really, that's it. So it's basically we should be able to, once we get the more consistent both loaves become. So if we look at them and say, well, if they look like they're made of the same stuff, then that may be an indication that it's not the contact binding. That there are a lot of open questions there, and it's an open debate in general, I think, with small bodies as to how they're formed and where that material comes from. But yeah, the closer we get, the better an idea we'll get of this.
Right, and a question for Andrea coming in from Ben Safe, who is asking how much risk is there from comet outgassing to Rosetta, mentioning specifically the solar panels, but obviously the rest of the spacecraft.
Well, okay, there are two things. The comet is emitting gas itself, and this is not a risk for the spacecraft itself. It is not disturbing us too much. The only real effect of gas, which is what we are really fighting right now, well, or we might be fighting soon, is the perturbation on the trajectory. We have very big solar arrays on this spacecraft. They are huge, and they act like sails into wind. We have gas stemming out, originating from the comet that is blowing the spacecraft away from the planned trajectory. Of course, we are trying to create models for this to predict how they behave, but first, the comet is very unpredictable, and it's not said that we can reconstruct an actual model of the winds, if you want, around the comet. So it's like it becomes a bit like weather forecast at the comet, so it's not that straightforward. For the arrays, this is not a problem at all. There's no mechanical stress at all on the arrays. The other is particles, the dust coming out of the comet. This was partially addressed already for the lander. For the time being, we do not observe. We have evidence that there is dust coming out from the comet, but there's no issue at all for the spacecraft. We cannot monitor any single degradation of the spacecraft performance. The arrays are permanently exposed to the sun, so they are also cleaned out by the sun activity itself, and there's no degradation at all we can observe. I don't expect this to be a real problem for the solar arrays unless we are impacted by a mechanical damage of the dust. Slightly different could be for the optics of the spacecraft, for the star tracker, the camera, and the instruments. There we might have to be a bit more careful. So we'll have to see in the coming weeks, months, whether this dust production develops and how it develops and whether it starts affecting our optical units.
Thank you very much. We're getting on towards the end of our program here, and I want to grab out the third last question. Actually, this is for our lander colleagues in DLR. There are a number of lander questions still outstanding, and I wonder if you could quickly address them. One is, what about surface temperature? Does that affect the lander? What about density and porosity? The other one is, how many people will be involved in the landing operations, getting onto the surface of the comet, and whether that's going to be an automated process, or how automated is that? I wonder if you could quickly, without going into too much detail, address those three questions.
Okay, you take temperature.
Okay, yeah, I take the temperature. Obviously, the temperature of the comet is quite important for us. If it's cold or if it's warm, it makes a difference for the lander, because we can see basically that the environment temperature is directly having an influence on the temperature inside the lander, and the temperature inside the lander is driving the operation we can do or we cannot do. I will say for other characteristics like density, porosity, obviously are also important for us at the moment of the landing. According to how hard is the surface or how soft it is, and obviously will be important when we will start to drill the comet, because obviously at that moment, according with the property of the surface, we will have to set an appropriate force of the drill in order to get the sample we want.
Without pushing the lander off.
Without pushing the lander off, correct. And okay, regarding
okay, then there was how many people are involved? Our operation.
Exactly.
About 15 people.
Yeah, let's say here we are not such a big group,
but we also have our partners at the Centre
Yes.
National d'Études Spéciales in France.
The CNES in France.
Exactly. And they have a much larger group. I have no idea how many people.
Okay, and then obviously we have all the scientists from all instruments coming or in any case supporting us during operation, and then we have this subsystem authority let's say, responsible for each of the subsystems of the lander, like communication system, battery, the CDMS, the central software, and so on. So here in Cologne, we are not that many, 15 people, but there are many people in CNES for the science of the lander, and then all people at the university, at the institute, responsible for the unit and the instruments.
Because we have 9 science instruments.
Exactly.
I think there was one more question, but I forget what it was.
Yeah, the final question was, is it an automated process, or how automated is the process?
Yes, it's fairly automated, if you could call it that. We upload the commands, and then the CDMS, which is the processing unit, fills them out. We have a couple contingency plans that it also automatically goes into, but we do hope that we will be able to have contact with the lander. Well, it is planned to have contact with the lander throughout the descent phase, and also at the beginning as we land, so that if anything unexpected should happen, we would be able to modify our operations directly. But basically, we have to plan for every contingency beforehand, because at some point it's not possible to upload new commands very quickly, because we would have to develop them, test them, and then send them, and it's a fairly long process. So I suppose you could say it is automated, mostly automated to a large extent.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last question, second last question, the final one is a PR question. Last question for, I think, Matt Taylor, our project scientist. And the question is, if the mission is successful, will it be the best mission in space history?
It's already the sexiest mission in space history, so I guess it can also be the best one.
Good stuff. Thank you very much. I would like to finish up with a comment on PR. A couple of people have asked, will there be a live stream or a webcast during the landing? And of course, absolutely, there will be quite a rather extensive webcast, and it will involve not only the center here at ESOC, but the Lander Control Center in Cologne, as well as the Science Center in Toulouse. So there'll be a really good live web coverage, and of course, the web team here at ESA will be working with our colleagues at the other agencies to provide real-time updates via our blogs, Twitter, Facebook, and any other channel we can get our hands on. That's pretty much it for our program today, and I would certainly like to thank each and every one of you. I'll go quickly around the table. We have Barbara Cozzoni and Valentina Lomach from the Philae operations team in Cologne. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting us.
We have Fred Jansen, our mission manager in STEC. Fred, thank you for your time today. I know you guys are very busy.
It's a pleasure as ever, Daniel.
And Matt, thank you very much, not only for your answers, but also for pulling the 10 winners from the hat. That was excellent.
It was my pleasure. Thanks very much.
And here at ESOC with me, Andrea Accomazzo, our flight director. Thank you very much, and good luck with all the challenges. And that goes for all of you. Good luck with all the challenges. I'd like to just mention a few things to our audience. The next news we expect is, of course, 15 September, where we have the announcement of the 2 preferred landing sites, Prime and Backup. Furthermore, you can follow us online at our website, esa.int/Rosetta, via our blogs, which is blogs.esa.int/Rosetta. You can follow us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, facebook.com/Rosetta Mission. We're on Twitter. We have at @ESA_Rosetta. We have at ESA, of course. We have at ESA Science, and we have at ESA Operations, coming right here from ESOC. This ESA Hangout is going to be archived in our YouTube channel, where you can watch it as you wish. That'll be youtube.com/ESA. And finally, I'd like to thank Emily Baldwin and Maria Bennett, working behind the scenes to make sure that our event was produced today. And thank you very much, Emily and Maria, now off camera. And to all of you who joined us from online, thank you very much for watching today. Thank you, everybody.